Hi, I'm Jay Leeming, and this is the Crane Bag Podcast, special secret magical episode number 4. Today we're going to be looking at a story from India, which describes the amazing things that can happen when you've got nothing at all. Once upon a time, there was a man who did not feel good about who he was. He felt he'd accomplished no great things in his life, and that he would accomplish no great things in his life. He and his wife lived in a broken-down house with a leaky roof at the edge of a small village. And they did not get along well. For she in her heart felt the difference between the life she wanted and the life she had. And this made her sorrowful, and it made her angry, and she nagged her husband all the time. He would stay out of the house. He would stay out late and only come home late at night when he was sure she was asleep. But one day, finally, one morning, she'd had enough. She went to their kitchen. She went to their one cooking pot, and she scraped out some stale rice from the bottom of that pot. And she wrapped it up in a cloth, and she went to her husband, and she said, "My husband, you must leave this house. Go out there in the world and earn us some money. Here, this is some stale rice. This is all we have left for food in this house. Take this for your lunch, and go earn us some money, or don't come back at all." Now he did not argue. He did not complain. He just took the stale rice in that cloth, and sadly he walked out the door. He wasn't sure where he was going. He wasn't sure what he was going to do. He walked through that village. He got to the edge of the village. He began walking through the countryside. There was a road there. He walked along that road. The clouds were high in the sky. There were cows far off. He could hear some birds singing in some trees. So he walked all morning, not sure where he was going, not sure what to do. Now about midday, when the sun was high in the sky, he came to a place where 3 roads crossed. And at this place there was a large and magnificent banyan tree. And this tree had amazing shade beneath it. Clearly it had sheltered travelers for hundreds of years. So he went to this tree. His legs ached. He sat down beneath that tree, and he said to himself, "I'm going to take a little rest." So he tied that cloth with the stale rice inside it to one of the branches of the tree. And then he lay down beneath that tree. He put his head on one of the roots of the tree as a pillow, and he went to sleep. Now what he did not know is that that tree was home to 4 forest spirits, 4 magical spirits who'd been all over the universe and had traveled far and wide through all the corners of creation. And they had tasted many delicacies in their time in this world. They had tasted many beautiful things, honey and ambrosia. They had even been to the palace of Indra, way up at the top of the sky, where they had eaten fruit from the trees of paradise. But they had never smelled anything so odd, strange, and interesting as this stale rice in that cloth. "What can this be?" they said to themselves. "This is so interesting. It smells just so strange and remarkable. What is it?" So, as quick as thought, they slipped into that bag, ate up all the rice, and then slipped out again. "Oh, that was amazing," they said. "That was just delicious. We've never tasted anything like stale, cold rice in a cloth like that. Ah, fantastic." And they were very thankful to the man there. If he had not come to that tree on that particular day, they might never have tasted cold, stale rice. So they decided to give him a gift. And they went into that bag. They left 4 magical objects in that bag, and then they flew away and disappeared into the wide summer sky. Now after some time, the man awoke. He woke up and he was hungry. His stomach was growling. "Oh boy, what am I going to do?" he thought to himself. And then he remembered the stale rice. "At least I've got that," he said. He went to the cloth, took it down from the branch, opened it up, and there was no rice in there at all. There was no rice at all. He was upset. "Where's my rice?" he said to himself. Instead, there were just 4 strange-looking wooden bowls. Very strange. One was round, one was square, one was triangular, and one was diamond-shaped. "What are these bowls? Somebody stole my rice and gave me these dumb-looking bowls," he said, and he threw them down on the ground. And as he did so, as they hit the ground, far off there was a sound in the air like the ringing of a bell. And then, as he watched, 12 beautiful serving women climbed out of the bowls and stood before him. They had amazing dresses on in all kinds of colors, gold and red and green and deep blue. They had earrings, they had jewels in their hair, they had bright flashing eyes, and they said, "Good sir, how may we help you?" And he said, I'm kind of hungry. And they said, "Why, of course, we can help with that." And just like that, in a flash, out of the thin air, they brought all kinds of succulent and delicious foods. Roast chicken, naan bread with garlic, yogurt, mango lassi, mangoes, strawberries, fruits, bananas, all kinds of bread. There was beer, there was lemonade. It was just amazing, fantastic food just appeared right there in that place. And this poor man, he ate of that food very happily. And when he was satisfied, the serving women took the dirty dishes, put them back into the bowls, and then they climbed into the bowls themselves, and they disappeared. "Wow," said the poor man, "that was amazing, that was amazing." And right away he knelt down on the ground there beneath that banyan tree, and he gave thanks to all the gods of this world. He gave thanks to Brahma the Creator, to Vishnu the Preserver, and Shiva the Destroyer. "Why, this is a great and good fortune which has befallen me," he said, "and I must tell my wife. I must tell my dear wife." So just like that, he put the wooden bowls into the cloth, wrapped them up, and he hurried home. Now he went home very fast, but it was just after sundown when he got there to their broken-down house with the leaky roof at the edge of their village. His wife was there. He said, "My dear wife, an amazing thing has happened." And he told her the whole story about the place where the 3 roads cross, about the great banyan tree, about these bowls which had magically appeared in his cloth. And then she said, "Well, show me." And he said, "All right." And he took the bowls out and he thumped them down on the ground. And just as before, there was a sound in the air like the ringing of a bell. And then 12 beautiful serving women climbed out of those bowls and said, "Good sir, good lady, how may we help you?" And the poor man's wife said, "We're kind of hungry." And they said, "Why, of course." And once again, they pulled all kinds of magical things out of the very thin air there. Ice cream and rolls and bread and steak and milkshakes and just fantastic foods that they never had before. So they ate that good and delicious dinner in their broken-down house. And when they were satisfied, the serving women took the dishes, put them back into the bowls, and then they climbed into the bowls themselves, and they disappeared. Well, they were overjoyed. "This is fantastic, my husband," she said. "Just wonderful." And he said, "I know." And right away they knelt down and they gave thanks to the gods of this universe, to Brahma the Creator, to Vishnu the Preserver, and to Shiva the Destroyer. And they gave thanks to their household gods as well. They said, "Oh, this is a mighty, wonderful, magnificent good fortune that has befallen us." And the husband said, "My dear wife, we must share this with everyone in the village. I say tomorrow, let's have a banquet and let's invite everyone in our town." "That's a wonderful idea," she said. So they agreed on it, and they went to sleep, happy in their hearts at the thought of the great and wonderful banquet they would have tomorrow evening. Well, darkness covered the face of the earth, and in the morning the sun rose, and there was light over all of creation, and the poor man got up, and he began walking through the village. He knocked on every door in that village, and he went to the alleys of that place. He went to the parks and the orchards. He talked to everyone he could find, and he said, "There's a banquet at my house. Come at sundown. It will be wonderful." And people looked at him a little strangely, it must be said, for they knew he came from that broken-down house with the leaky roof at the edge of town, and they'd seen that house, and they knew it didn't seem like there was much food in there at all. How could there be a banquet in that place? So they imagined having things like air and crusty bread and old stale rice and rusty water. But they nodded and said, "Yes, we'll try to come." But it must be said, many of them ate a lot of food before the appointed hour arrived. They ate lots of food because they were sure they would not have a great banquet at his house. So the day went on. Finally, sundown came. Everybody went to his house, the house of the poor man and his wife. There wasn't room for them all inside, so many of them stood outside, looked in the windows. Inside the house, there was the poor man and his wife. And he began to speak. And he said, "My dear friends, thank you for coming to our house. Thank you for being here. We have a wonderful thing to show you. And you may look around. You may say, 'Where is this banquet? Where is this delicious food?' Well, watch this." And he took the 4 wooden bowls and he thumped them down on the ground. As he did so, there was a sound in the air like the ringing of a bell. and out of those bowls climbed the 12 beautiful serving women. And they stood before everyone, and they bowed, and they said, "Good sir, good lady, dear friends, how may we help you?" So right away, people began ordering food and calling out what they wanted, and these ladies provided all of it for them. There was fantastic food in that place, just incredible, delicious things from all the corners of the earth. And after a while, one of the serving women began to play an instrument. Another began to sing. And a third one told a great story. She sang a great story about the creation of the universe and the net of Indra, the net in which every part of that net is a jewel, and inside every jewel there is an entire world filled with chickens and people and bears and deep forests and mountains and snows, and a hut in that world, and inside that hut is an old man telling the story about Indra's net filled with jewels and about the worlds inside those jewels. And she sang this song, and when she was done, the whole story vanished into thin air like sparkling dust. And then when everyone was satisfied, the serving women took the dishes, put them back into the bowls, they climbed into the bowls themselves, and they disappeared. Well, there was much laughter and joking and good times in that house that night. And after it was all finished, people began to straggle home, happy in their hearts for that wonderful banquet they'd had at the poor man's house. And the poor man said to his wife, "My dear wife, we must have a banquet every week." "Yes, my husband, that's a great idea. We shall have a banquet every week for the whole village." So they did that. It became a custom in that village. Once a week there was a grand and terrific banquet at the poor man's house, and everybody came. Now, on the other side of this village, there was another man living, a rich man. Now, he lived in a golden palace. And he walked around all day thinking that he was the best thing in the world, the greatest man ever. He walked around saying to himself, "I'm great, I'm great, I'm great." And sometimes his servants even said to him, "Sir, you are very great." So he felt he was very great. And he went to these banquets and he enjoyed the food there, the delicious food, but he was a little envious. He was actually a little more than just envious. He was very envious about the poor man and these banquets he was having. "I don't have banquets at my palace. What's going on? This guy, he lives like in a cardboard box, and he's having a banquet for the whole village. This is ridiculous." So he went to those banquets, but he kept his ears open, and he listened and he asked questions. And after a while, he heard from the poor man the story of how he had gotten those bowls. How he'd gone to the banyan tree where the 3 roads cross, and he'd put food in the branches of that tree, and how these magic bowls had appeared in the cloth later. So as soon as he heard this, he raced home. It was after dark. He went to his golden palace, and he summoned his servants and his head cook. And he said, "I want you to stay up all night if you have to. Make me a basket full of delicious food. I'm going to bring it to a special place tomorrow. That's all you need to know. Spend all night making delicious food." So darkness filled the world. Moonlight shone down on that village. Everyone slept. The poor man and his wife slept. Everyone in that village slept. The rich man slept as well. But the cook of the rich man, he did not sleep. And the cook's helpers, they did not sleep either. They worked all night long, making incredible, amazing food. Finally, the sun rose the next day, and there it was. There was a basket filled with delicious food in the main banquet hall of the rich man. He saw this basket. "This is great," he said. And then he summoned his servants, and he said, "Take me to the place where the 3 roads cross." And they took a golden chair, and he sat down in it, and they lifted it up onto 2 poles, and 4 strong men began to carry him out of that palace and through the village. Through the village they went, and then they came to the countryside, and they carried him through that countryside. It was a hot day. The sun was in the sky. There were cows in the fields. The rich man fanned his face with a blue fan. And finally, about noon, they came to a place where 3 roads cross. And there was the great and magnificent banyan tree, just like the poor man had described it. And the rich man got out of his chair with the basket, and he said, "Now leave me here and come back in 2 hours. So the servants made themselves scarce, and the rich man put the basket in a branch of the tree. And then he lay down beneath that tree, using one of the roots as a pillow, and he tried to sleep. But it was very hard. It was hard to sleep in that place. He was so excited. What was going to happen? These magic bowls were going to come to him too. Hopefully. Oh, he was so excited. But it was a hot day, and the shade was very cool, so finally he did manage to fall asleep. And when he awoke, He went to that basket, and it was true. The food was not in there. There was no food at all. There was a cloth in there. He took the basket down, he opened up the cloth, and there were 4 wooden bowls in there, just like the poor man's. One was round, one was square, one was triangular, and one was diamond-shaped. Now, these were wooden, but the wood was of a darker color than the poor man's. It was kind of like crow feather color, or kind of like smoky bowls they looked like. But still, besides that, they were exactly the same, and they must be magical, he told himself. So his servants showed up, and he got in the golden chair, and they all hurried him back to the golden palace that he lived in. He got there, and he called his servants, and he said, "Tomorrow we shall have the best banquet this town has ever seen, the most incredible, amazing banquet this world has ever seen. It will happen here in this palace. Make everything ready. And tomorrow go out and announce this all to everyone in the village." So the night came, and the night went away. The sun rose, and the messengers from the rich man's palace went out into the village, and they spoke to everyone they could find. They spoke to the people in the market, to the people in their houses, to the farmers in the field. They invited everyone to a banquet at the rich man's house. Well, people were very excited. They'd been to the banquets at the poor man's house, and these were fantastic. But a banquet at the rich man's house? Wow, I mean, the food at this place would be just beyond anything imaginable, they thought. Many people did not eat all day long, just in preparation for this amazing banquet. All except for the poor man and his wife, for they'd heard about this. They got the invitation like everybody else, but they said to themselves, we've got 1 banquet every week. We don't need 2, so I think we'll just stay home. So they did that. And the appointed hour came. The sun went down, and the whole village, except for the poor man and his wife, they gathered at the house of the rich man. Now, there was room for all of them inside that place. There was a huge banquet hall with big oak tables. There were fountains in the corner. There were people playing music. There were birds in cages singing songs. It was a wonderful and amazing room. And there was the rich man and his wife at the front of the room. He had a beautiful beard there. He'd cleaned it for the occasion. His wife had her long hair. She had a special jeweled comb in that hair. And the rich man began to speak. "Dear citizens of this town, thank you for coming to this place. Thank you for adorning the crown of my house with the jewels of your presence. Tonight we are going to have a banquet like the world has never seen before. You look around, you ask yourself, where is the food? Where is the delicious food that you must have at a banquet? Well, watch this." And he pulled aside a cloth, and beneath it there were 4 wooden bowls. They looked just like the poor man's bowls, but they were darker, smoky-colored. And then he picked them up, and he thumped them down on the ground. As he did so, there was a crack of thunder far off at the edge of the sky, and out of these bowls climbed the meanest, toughest, hairiest, snarliest, sweatiest, grungiest, snarliest, angriest-looking barbers you've ever seen. They were all holding scissors and razors and shaving cream, and they looked at all the people there, and the biggest, toughest one looked at them all and said, "Everybody gets shaved!" And people screamed, and they headed for the windows and the doors. They ran, but it was no use. These barbers were fierce, and they were fast. They grabbed people. They blocked the exits. The biggest one grabbed the rich man, got him in a headlock, and cut off all his hair, and snipped off his beard, and then shaved his head so it was clean and empty like the surface of a brass bowl. And then someone grabbed his wife, and they cut off all her hair. All her jeweled, beautiful hair fell to the floor, and they shaved her head until she was bald, bald, bald. People were screaming. They were running. There was hair all over the floor. There was hair flying through the air. People didn't want to be shaved, but they were shaved. All their hair had to come off. All of their hair had to come off. And then people were still very hungry when this was all done. They were confused. They wanted to get out of there. They went to the door, and there, at the door, one of the biggest barbers of all was standing, and he had a huge mirror. And as people left the rich man's house, he forced them to look into that mirror and take a deep, long, good look at themselves. So from that day forward, the poor man and his wife lived lives that were happy and filled with contentment. But no one in that village went to a banquet at the rich man's house ever again. Well, this is a fun story, huh? I like this story a lot. I love how it begins in emptiness and ends up with surprising results, basically. We have a hard time with emptiness, maybe, huh? In the West, in America, in the West in general, right? I think of those Japanese Zen gardens, right, where emptiness is cultivated like a flower. But here in America, in my town anyway, we're filled with stuff. The stores are filled with stuff. We like having stuff. This story begins in emptiness. It begins with a man who's a failure, basically. Broken down house, leaky roof. He's a failure to himself, at least, even if in the world somebody might say, oh, that's okay. Broken down house, it's all right. But he doesn't feel good about himself. The story says that pretty clearly. And his wife doesn't feel good about who he is or perhaps who she is either. And we have a classic situation, the never-do-well husband, the failure husband, and the nagging wife. And these are stereotypes, right? But it's helpful to remember that these characters, all of them, can live inside of us. And we don't need to be limited by gender either, right? Many of us could have been that failure husband. Many of us could be that nagging wife. They're just functions that are served in the story, and any of us could be either one of them. We don't need to feel limited by our gender to be one or the other. So we're not seeing either one of them at their best, that's for sure. But it's interesting to consider that without her nagging, the story would not move forward at all. If she was fine with it, he would stay on the couch and nothing would change. The story would be static. It would be just a single moment instead of a story. But she does nag him. She's the one who has this impulse, she acts on her feeling that they can live a better life. He is not acting, it seems. He's just lying around. But she's the one who takes some action, goes and gets the stale rice and says, look, honey, get out of the house, earn some money, and make our lives better. So he does leave the house because of her inspiring him, if I can use that word in that way. And off he goes, and he comes to this place where 3 roads cross. This is one of my favorite places in the story. If there's a place in the story I want to hang out, it's at the crossing of the 3 roads. And it seems like a small detail, just an embellishment perhaps in the story, but the fact that there's 3 roads is pretty interesting. I'm used to places where 2 roads cross. North, south, east, west. That's what most of the road crossings are like that I run into. But this is one that's 3 roads. It's almost as if the story's saying that here's a place where something surprising can enter, something beyond our usual sense of the way the world is. Not just 2 roads, but 3 roads cross in this place. And of course, something surprising does happen. This is where the magic arrives into his life. And he receives magic bowls. He's empty, he's hungry, he's living a life of poverty, but he doesn't just receive food. He does receive food, but he also receives these magic bowls which produce the food, which create wealth and abundance. So it's a beautiful thing. It's like, you give a person a fish, they'll eat for a day. You teach them how to fish, and they'll eat for the rest of their lives. The magic that comes to him is not just simply food for that day, but a permanent means, a tool, a method for going from the condition of emptiness to the condition of satisfaction and contentment. That's what he receives in this way at this place where the 3 roads cross. And his response is great and interesting too. He responds by thanking the gods of the world, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. He gives thanks. He's grateful for what he has received. And also, of course, he wants to share this with his wife. He hasn't forgotten his wife. He isn't just running away forever. She is still a part of his world, a part of the journey of his heart. And so when he receives these bowls, he wants to share them with her. So it's as if his experiences have taught him humility and humbleness, which serves him well in this moment. And the story seems to say that's how we should respond to the magical, surprising things that arrive to us, is with thanks and with gratefulness and with a generous spirit and not a stingy spirit. So then we get the party and all that stuff, and then we get the rich man. we have two opposite characters in this story. The man who thinks he's worth nothing at all, and the man that thinks he's worth a ton of money. And that's the rich man. And the rich man tries the same thing, but his inspiration is more envy and competition than generosity. And his feeling that he is the greatest thing ever is a liability when it comes to the bowls, because he is unable to give thanks in the same way, unable to be generous in the same way as the poor man, and so he fails the test. Which is kind of reassuring, because none of us want to live in a house with a broken down roof. None of us want to feel like a failure. But perhaps that experience, if we've had it in our lives, is of some use. And it's a crucial education that will help us to navigate not just the world, but the larger world, the cosmos, right? When magic comes to us, we might respond in a better way because we've experienced emptiness. We've experienced want and hardship. So I love that this story says that. I like that. And it's encouraging to think when you're going through hard times and you're lying there on the couch feeling like a failure, perhaps it may lead to something. And perhaps it's a necessary education that will help you to deal with the magic when it does arrive. And finally, of course, we've got these amazing barbers, which just come out of nowhere. I love them. They're fantastic. And this great mirror thing at the end where everybody has to take a look at themselves. So it can be easy to hear a story like this and brush it off as something shallow, as just a trifle, just a silly story. But I think there is more to it than that. And I think there are deeper things being said in this story. And that image of the mirror at the end, it seems to be saying something about how we see ourselves. Who do we think we are? Who are we? Do we like what we see when we look in the mirror or not? The poor man basically didn't like what he saw in the mirror at the beginning of the story. But at the end, we've got these bald, hungry people who came to the banquet at the rich man's house. And that, to me, is a moment when the story is saying, hang on, wait a minute, stop. Like a lot of things just happened, you're laughing, you think it's funny, but here, look in the mirror. The characters look in the mirror, and the story asks us to do that. It's a reflective moment in every sense. Who are you? What do you want? How do you respond? Are you humble? Do you think you're great? Are you conceited? What motivates you in this life? And the story holds the mirror up to those characters and perhaps to us as well. Here's a poem for you by the poet Rumi, who lived in Persia about 800 years ago. It's a poem called Emptiness, in a translation by Coleman Barks. I've said before that every craftsman searches for what's not there to practice his craft. A builder looks for the rotten hole where the roof caved in. A water carrier picks the empty pot. A carpenter stops at the house with no door. Workers rush toward some hint of emptiness, which they then start to fill. Their hope, though, is for emptiness, so don't think you must avoid it. It contains what you need. Dear soul, if you were not friends with the vast nothing inside, why would you always be casting your net into it and waiting so patiently? This invisible ocean has given you such abundance, but still you call it death, that which provides you with sustenance and with work. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you've got thoughts about the story, I'd love to hear them, either by email or through my Patreon thingamajig. Thanks to those who are supporting this podcast. Without you, I'm not sure it would even happen. So I very much appreciate it. And may we all find our way at some point to that magical place where three roads cross. Thanks for listening, and take care.